Imagine for a moment that the world around you is not something separate from your mind, but a mirror of it. That what you call reality is in fact a dance between your consciousness and the universe. And in this dance, every thought, every emotion, every desire you carry is not just some private echo bouncing inside your skull, but a signal, a vibration, resonating with the very fabric of existence. Now consider the notion of desire, not as longing, not as lack, but as a declaration of what already is. You see, most people live as if their dreams are distant, hanging somewhere in the future like fruit on a branch just out of reach. They speak in terms of "I hope," or "someday," or "if only." And in doing so, they inadvertently reinforce the illusion that they are separate from what they seek. But what if I told you that the very act of wanting is a clue that what you want is already here, already present, waiting? To act as if your desire is already here is not to pretend or to play make-believe. It is to move into alignment with the rhythm of reality. It is to stop asking the world for permission to feel whole, and to start behaving as though the fullness of life already pulses through you. Because it does. When you act as if your desire is here, you are not faking anything. You are remembering. You are shedding the trance of scarcity, the myth that fulfillment lies somewhere out there. And instead, you are awakening to the truth that everything you could ever need is coded within the present moment, like a melody waiting for you to hum its tune. This is not about delusion. It's about clarity. It's about realizing that your circumstances are not the prison. They are the clay. Your perception molds them, gives them meaning, breathes them into shape. If you walk through life believing that you are incomplete without the thing you seek, then you cast yourself into the role of the beggar. But if you walk with the posture of one who already possesses what they desire, you become the artist, the creator, the master of your experience. You do not attract what you chase. You attract what you are. And what you are is constantly revealed through how you behave. So the way you carry yourself, the words you speak, the emotions you entertain, all of these are signals to the world about who you believe yourself to be. You must begin to speak from the victory, not toward it. Dress in alignment with the reality you want, not the one you resent. Sit, breathe, move, and love as one who already has what they once thought they lacked. This is the paradox, isn't it? That by needing nothing, you gain everything. By no longer chasing, you draw it in. By no longer waiting, you realize you were never lacking. Because in truth, there is no such thing as the future, there is only now. Rippling outward in infinite directions, taking on the form you most believe in. To act as if your desire is already here is to step out of time. It is to meet the eternal in this very breath. It is to laugh at the old story that said you had to strive and struggle and suffer to earn your worth. You were worthy the moment you were born. And you are still worthy now. So go on. Step into the feeling. Not tomorrow. Now. Walk with the joy as if the love has arrived. Breathe with the peace as if the healing is complete. Speak with the confidence as if the doors are already open, because they are. Desire is often misunderstood. Most people see it as a sign of something missing. They believe that to desire is to acknowledge absence, to long for something they do not yet have. But that interpretation creates a distortion in how we live and how we interact with the world. The moment we see desire as a sign of lack, we step into the illusion that life is incomplete, that we are incomplete, and that what we long for is separate from us, locked away behind time or effort or permission. And yet, the truth is far more mysterious and liberating. What if desire is not a signal of what's missing, but of what's already present? What if it's the soul's way of showing you that something is already part of your path, already intertwined with your being, simply waiting for you to recognize it, not attain it? Desire arises because somewhere deep within you, you've already tasted the feeling of having. Even if only for a brief flicker, a dream or a thought, there was a resonance, a frequency that matched something real. That flicker is not fantasy. That moment of emotional clarity, that inner knowing, is not a trick your mind is playing. It is a glimpse of what already exists in the unseen. You are not inventing your desire out of nowhere. You are remembering, you are awakening to a dimension of yourself that has always been there. This is why certain desires feel sacred, almost haunting. They return again and again, whispering to you in the quiet moments, in the solitude, in the spaces between distractions. They echo not because you are missing them, but because they are calling you to see them as already yours. When you desire to be free, to be loved, to live with purpose, those feelings don't emerge from lack. They emerge from truth. They're not reminders of what you don't have. They're reminders of who you really are. Think of a seed buried in the soil. From the outside, it may look like nothing is happening, but within, life is unfolding. The roots are forming. The potential is already in motion. The seed doesn't hope to become a tree. It already is a tree, just in another form. Its desire to grow is not because it is lacking in life, but because it is full of it. So full that it must express it outward. In the same way, your desire is the sprouting of something already alive within you. You are not chasing it. You are becoming aware of it. But the moment you label your desire as something separate, something out there in a distant future, you begin to disconnect from its power. You make it conditional. You turn it into a goal that you might achieve, rather than a truth that is unfolding. And so you enter a cycle of striving, hoping, delaying. You say, I'll feel happy when, or I'll be at peace once, and unknowingly push your own fulfillment further into the future, never to be reached. This is the trap. This is the sleep so many never wake from. To live wisely is to flip this perspective. It is to realize that desire is the evidence of a deeper connection. It is not a signal of distance, but a signpost of alignment. When you feel drawn to something, a life, a relationship, a calling, it is not because it is missing, but because it is near. It is already within the orbit of your being. You are being asked not to chase, but to remember. Not to pursue, but to receive. But this is where most people go wrong. They believe they must do something grand, prove their worth, sacrifice, or struggle before they are allowed to feel fulfilled. They think desire is something they must earn the right to have. But the reality is, Desire is an invitation, not a negotiation. It is not saying, look, this is already yours in essence. Now align with it in form. So how do you align? You act as if. You embody the reality inwardly before it ever shows up outwardly. You don't wait for the evidence. You become the evidence. You shift your inner state, not because the outer world has changed, but because your inner world already knows the truth. You act from the desire, not toward it. Because once you realize the desire is already here, in some form, spiritually, energetically, emotionally, you begin to live from a place of wholeness, not lack. And when you live from that place, the outer world has no choice but to reflect it. It is not magic, though it may feel magical. It is resonance, harmony, the natural law of reflection. The same way your face is reflected in the mirror, not by demand, but by position. You stand in front of the mirror, and it shows you what you are. Life is the same. It reflects what you are being. If you carry the belief that your desire is far away, the mirror of life shows you distance. If you carry the feeling that it is already here, the mirror confirms it. So instead of asking, how do I get what I want, begin asking, how would I think, feel, speak, and move if I already had it? And then live that way. Not to trick the universe, but to remember your power. To close the gap between wanting and being. Because the truth is, there was never a gap to begin with. The gap was in your perception. And once that gap dissolves, you begin to realize that all this time, you weren't waiting for your desire to come to you. It was waiting for you to come back to yourself. The way we perceive reality is not a passive act. It is not something that merely happens to us. It is a creative participation, a shaping of the world through the lens of our own consciousness. Most people live with the assumption that reality is fixed, external, separate from the inner world of their thoughts and emotions. They believe that events unfold independently of their perception, that life is something they must react to, cope with, but that is only one side of the story, and it is incomplete. The other side, the quieter truth, is that life does not simply happen to us. It responds to us. It mirrors our inner state, reflects our beliefs, and dances in harmony with the frequency we hold within. This is not a metaphorical idea. It is a deeply experiential one. If you walk into a room expecting hostility, your body tenses, your tone sharpens, your defenses rise, and others react accordingly. If you approach with openness, ease, and confidence, the energy shifts. It is subtle, yes, but real. In every moment, your inner posture sends ripples outward, and those ripples return in kind. So when it comes to desire, when it comes to the life you long for, the reality you yearn to live, it is not simply a matter of external effort. It is more profoundly a matter of internal alignment. The world around you becomes a canvas, and your consciousness the brush. What you believe, how you feel, what you expect, all of these are the colors with which you paint your experience. And the brushstrokes are your behavior, your words, your attention. Life is not an objective photograph taken from the outside. It is a living painting, created from the inside out. This is why two people can live the same moment and experience completely different realities. One sees opportunity, the other sees danger. One sees beauty, the other sees decay. And neither is wrong. Each is responding to the world not as it is, but as they are. Reality is filtered through the self and then returned back to the self. And so the world becomes a loop, a feedback system, echoing the truths we hold, the fears we nurture, the desires we cherish, and the doubts we feed. When you begin to grasp this, something shifts. You stop blaming the world for being unkind or unfair. You stop waiting for life to prove itself before you allow yourself to feel joy or peace or confidence. You begin instead to recognize that the external mirrors the internal. If you walk around believing that you are not enough, that life is against you, that your desires are too big or too distant, then the world will reinforce that belief, not because it is cruel, but because it is obedient. It listens to your signal and it plays it back. But if you begin to shift the frequency, not with force, but with awareness, you start to see change. If you carry yourself as someone who already holds what they desire, who already feels grateful, who already trusts the unfolding, then the world begins to match that tone. People treat you differently, opportunities reveal themselves, the energy of your surroundings begins to bend toward your belief, not as an act of magic, but as a response to resonance. This is not about pretending. It is not about putting on a mask or faking emotions. That only creates friction. This is about truly understanding that your perception is the gateway through which life flows. That by changing your perspective, you are not denying reality. You are shaping it. You are inviting a different rhythm, a different flavor, a different melody to play through your experience. You do not need to fix everything outside of you. You do not need to wait for the world to give you permission to feel whole. You need only to shift the lens through which you see. And that lens is crafted from your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotional tone. Begin to observe them, not judge them, not resist them, but simply observe. Ask yourself, what story am I telling about my life? What assumptions am I making about my worth, my future, my path? And are those assumptions serving me or trapping me? Because when you change the story, you change the scenery. When you change the emotional atmosphere within, the weather outside begins to follow. And this is not about controlling the world. It is about collaborating with it, flowing with it, co-creating it. It is about realizing that the walls you thought were solid are in fact responsive, that the path you thought was blocked may simply be waiting for you to believe it is open. So many spend their lives locked in patterns they don't understand, repeating cycles of disappointment, fear, scarcity. They don't realize that those cycles are reflections, not punishments. That the world is not mocking them, but mirroring them. That the change they seek is not waiting in some future moment. It is waiting in their present awareness. The shift is always within reach, but it begins inside. When you act from the belief that your desire is already here, you change your tone. You no longer beg life for crumbs. You no longer plead with the universe for mercy. You speak from fullness. You walk with clarity. You listen with peace. And that energy does not go unnoticed. It reverberates. It touches others. It alters the rhythm of your day, your relationships, your decisions. You don't have to force your desires into being. You only have to align yourself with them. You only have to become a clear signal, a resonant match for what you already feel called to. And the way you do that is by embodying it now. Not someday, now. You let your inner world become the sanctuary where your dreams already live, and from there you move not to chase but to receive, not to demand but to express, not to wait but to become. There is a curious paradox at the heart of life. The more desperately you chase something, the more it seems to slip away, like trying to catch your own shadow. The harder you run toward it, the farther it retreats. This is especially true of desires. The more you yearn, plead, or strive for something from a place of lack, the more distant it appears. It's as if the universe senses your desperation, not your dream. But when you shift your energy, when you begin to embody the state of already having, already being, already living what you seek, the world bends differently around you. That is the strange and subtle magic of being. You do not attract what you pursue, you attract what you already are. This is not to say that dreams do not matter or that effort is meaningless. It is to say that the emotional foundation beneath your actions is far more powerful than the actions themselves. If you take steps towards something from the belief that you are not enough until you get it, then those steps carry with them the scent of incompleteness. Your very striving sends a message. I do not have. And so that becomes your lived experience. You might work hard, plan meticulously, pray earnestly, but if the core of your being still hums with lack, Slan, land, the angel. On the other hand, if you rest in the awareness that you are already whole, already connected to the essence of what you want, then your actions carry a different vibration. They become expressions of abundance, not cries for help. Your steps are not frantic, they are graceful. They are rooted. And because of that, the world responds. People feel your confidence before you speak. Opportunities arise not because you chase them, but because your energy invites them. This is not a trick, it's alignment. People often misunderstand this and assume it means you should do nothing. But being what you seek is not about inaction. It is about inspired action. It is about moving from a place of inner truth rather than external desperation. When you embody peace, you act with peace. When you embody love, you speak with love. When you embody success, your decisions reflect confidence and clarity. You are no longer reacting to emptiness. You are expressing fullness. And that expression draws things to you with an ease that striving can never replicate. You have likely felt this, even if only briefly. Think of a time when you felt utterly confident, not because someone praised you, but because you were in alignment with yourself. In those moments, you didn't need to prove anything. You didn't need to convince or control. You simply were. And the world noticed. Things flowed. People listened. Doors opened. That is the state where manifestation becomes natural, not forced. It is the place where you become magnetic, not because of what you do, but because of who you are being. Most people live in reverse. They believe they must first have something in order to feel a certain way. When I get the job, I'll feel successful. When I meet the right person, I'll feel love. When I'm wealthy, I'll feel secure. But life does not operate on that timeline. It responds to inner signals, not outer conditions. If you wait for the external to change before you give yourself permission to feel differently, you trap yourself in an endless loop of postponement. The real shift begins when you flip the script and decide to feel now what you think you can only feel later. That choice to feel, think, and act as though your desire is already yours is not a lie. It is a deeper truth. It is an act of trust in the unseen, a surrender to the knowing that what is meant for you is already a part of your energetic field. The job, the relationship, the peace of mind, they are not separate from you. They are drawn toward the version of you that aligns with them. So the work is not to chase them down like a predator stalking its prey. The work is to become the version of yourself that no longer doubts their place in your life. This is where many falter. They try to force alignment through effort, through routine, through control. But force is always a sign of misalignment. When you are in harmony with your desire, action becomes fluid. You don't overthink, you don't agonize, you simply move in rhythm with the current that is already carrying you. You know you're no longer chasing, you're allowing. And this shift is not something dramatic. Often it's as simple as a breath, a pause, a realization that you've been gripping too tightly. When you let go of needing the desire to prove your worth or fix your life, you return to the state that naturally attracts it. You become light, you become receptive. And in that openness, the very things you once chased now find their way to you, not because you begged for them, but because you became ready to receive them. You do not have to act strong to attract strength. You only need to stop identifying with weakness. You don't have to act lovable to attract love. You only need to stop telling the story that you are unworthy. When you change your identity, your outer world must follow. Not because you forced it to, but because the world has no choice but to meet you where you are. That is the law. The internal state dictates the external reflection. The being comes before the having. So, pause. Ask yourself not what you want, but who you would be if it were already yours. Then be that now. Not in some abstract theoretical way, but in the most practical, grounded sense. Sit with that version of you. Walk like them. Think like them. Speak like them, not because you're pretending, but because you're unveiling. Because what you seek is not separate from who you are. It is encoded in your essence, waiting to be remembered, not earned. And in remembering, you align with what you were always meant to receive, not through pursuit, but through... There's something deeply mysterious about the present moment. It is so simple, so silent, so ordinary, that most people overlook it entirely. Their minds are constantly leaning forward, anticipating the next event, the next opportunity, the next fix. Their thoughts spin webs of what might happen or what could go wrong. The future becomes a kind of idol, a place where happiness, peace, and fulfillment are always promised but never delivered. The mind says, once I get there, I'll finally be okay. But there never arrives. The future is always just out of reach. What people don't realize is that what they long for isn't in some distant moment. They are looking for something that has always been available now. The present moment is not just a stepping stone to the future. It is the only place anything real ever happens. Every future you dream of, every desire you carry, every hope that fills your heart, all of it can only be met here, in this breath, in this space. The idea that something will change later, that peace will arrive tomorrow, or that joy will come when your circumstances shift, is an illusion born from the habit of delay. It's like looking at the horizon and trying to touch it. You never reach it because it was never meant to be reached. And so the tragedy is this: people postpone their aliveness. They delay their joy. They put their freedom on hold. All because they believe it's tied to something external, some condition, achievement, or permission from life. But the truth is that your wholeness is already here. It is buried beneath the noise, beneath the story, beneath the rush to arrive somewhere better. You don't need a future event to feel complete. You need only to come back to this moment, not as a task, not as a meditation exercise, but desire tricks the mind into believing it must strive, but the heart knows better. The heart understands that the feeling you think you're chasing is already available, because the only place it can ever be felt is now. You want love? Feel it now. Not from another, but from within. You want peace? Stop seeking and be still, because the act of seeking is what's disturbing your peace in the first place. You want abundance? Begin to sense the fullness of what already surrounds you. The air in your lungs, the beat of your heart, the warmth of sunlight. These are not trivial things. They are the foundation of life itself. The more you slow down and enter this moment, the more you begin to see that nothing is actually missing. The mind may protest. It may remind you of your goals, your problems, your past. But none of that is here. Not truly. What is real is what is present. And if you can learn to settle into this space without resistance, without grasping, you start to feel something remarkable, a quiet joy, a still confidence, a sense that you are already okay, already safe, already aligned. And from that space, you don't need to create a better future. You naturally walk into one because you are no longer driven by fear or lack. You are moved by clarity. This is why acting as if your desire is already fulfilled brings it into form, not through force, but through presence. When you feel as though what you want is already here, you stop creating the energy of distance. You no longer say, "It's over there," and "I'm stuck here." Instead, you say, "It's in me. I feel it. I live it." That subtle shift changes everything. You stop reinforcing separation and start radiating connection. You stop longing and start allowing. And in that allowance, life meets you. Not in the future, but right here. This is the paradox that confuses many. When you stop needing the future to be different, the future begins to transform. Not because you controlled it, but because you return to yourself. The present moment is the womb of all creation. It is where thoughts turn into energy, and energy turns into matter. When you align with peace now, when you align with love now, when you align with abundance now, you are planting seeds in the only soil that can grow them, the now. If you wait for the world to give you a reason to feel good, you become a prisoner of conditions. You make your inner state a slave to outer events. But if you decide to feel now what you believed only the future could give you, you reclaim your power. You stop waiting. You start living. You begin to realize that your experience is not a result of the world. It is a reflection of your inner climate, and the present moment is where that climate is felt, shaped, and projected. There is nothing magical about someday. There is nothing inherently better about tomorrow. Those are ideas, not realities. The only thing that exists with any real power is this moment, this inhale, this heartbeat. If you can learn to live here, to really live here, you begin to see how unnecessary the constant grasping was. You stop chasing and start welcoming. You stop wishing and start embodying. And the more you embody, the more naturally the outer world follows. There is a stillness that lives beneath your thoughts, a knowing that does not depend on logic or evidence. It whispers, "You are already home." It reminds you that what you seek is not a destination, but a frequency. And that frequency can only be tuned into now. Not later, not after. Now. Everything else is a postponement. Everything else is a shadow. This moment, in all its ordinariness, holds the seed of everything extraordinary. Not because it contains what the future will bring, but because it contains you, your awareness, your presence, your choice to feel. To feel love without a lover, to feel peace without resolution, to feel joy without cause. That is the greatest power you hold. To choose your state, independent of your story. To access fulfillment not because something changed, but because you remembered that nothing was missing. You were simply distracted, lost in the idea that life begins later. It doesn't. It begins here. It always has. There is something profoundly different between hoping and knowing. Hope carries within it the subtle scent of uncertainty. It waits. It wonders. It dreams with fingers crossed. Hope whispers, maybe someday. It's a posture of longing, often born from a belief that what you want might not come true. It carries a softness, a gentleness, even a kind of beauty. But it is not power. Power comes from certainty. Certainty doesn't hope. It doesn't beg. It moves with clarity. It speaks with calm authority. It walks through the world with a presence that says, "This is already mine." And that difference, that quiet shift in energy, is the dividing line between a life of waiting and a life of manifestation. When you carry hope, you may feel good for a while. It's better than despair, certainly, but deep beneath it, there is a silent agreement with doubt. There is an unspoken permission to wait and see. And when you wait and see, the world waits with you. It reflects back the hesitation you carry. It mirrors the ambiguity in your energy. But when you shift into certainty, something else begins to happen. You no longer watch for signs, you become the sign. You no longer ask for reassurance. You move as if life is already responding. And because you do, it does. Certainty does not mean arrogance or blindness. It is not about forcing an outcome or pretending you are in control of every detail. It is about resting in the knowing that what is aligned with your deepest truth cannot miss you, that you don't have to clench your fists or chase after it, You only have to become a clear vessel for it. Certainty is not about being rigid. It is about being rooted. Grounded in your worth, anchored in your vision, steady in your spirit. People often confuse certainty with evidence. They believe they will feel certain once they see proof, once the thing arrives, once the circumstance shifts. Imagine for a moment that your mind is not something you are at war with, but rather something that works in service to your deepest desires, your highest values. The mind is an extraordinary tool capable of thought, creativity, and reason, but like any tool, it must be used wisely. Too often, we forget that we are the ones who shape it. We mistakenly believe that our thoughts are our masters, leading us through the labyrinth of life. But in truth, it is we who should be in control, not our minds. When we truly understand this, a profound shift occurs. We recognize that our thoughts are simply transient waves on the ocean of our consciousness, and we are the ocean itself, vast, endless, and free. The mind is here to serve, to guide us towards what we truly want, not to trap us in cycles of anxiety, doubt, or confusion. So let us take a moment to reconsider our relationship with our minds and embrace the truth that we are its masters, not its slaves. Imagine for a moment that your mind is not something you are at war with, but rather something that works in service to your deepest desires, your highest values. The mind is an extraordinary tool capable of thought, creativity, and reason, but like any tool, it must be used wisely. Too often, we forget that we are the ones who shape it. We mistakenly believe that our thoughts are our masters, leading us through the labyrinth of life. But in truth, it is we who should be in control, not our minds. This is the great misunderstanding we all share, that we are bound to our minds, that they shape our reality in a way that we cannot escape. We live in a world where we are constantly told what to think, what to do, what to believe. We are swept up in the endless stream of thoughts that flow through us every day, thoughts of fear, doubt, inside. And somehow we begin to identify with them. We believe that these thoughts are who we are, that they are the very fabric of our existence. But in reality, these thoughts are not us at all. They are simply temporary patterns of energy that pass through our consciousness like clouds in the sky. The truth is that the mind, when left unchecked, will often run wild, following its own impulses, creating its own narrative. We allow it to dictate our emotions, our actions, and our beliefs. We become trapped in an endless cycle of thoughts that seem to control us instead of us controlling them. This is where the confusion arises. We think that we are at the mercy of our thoughts, but this is an illusion. We are not slaves to the mind, we are its masters. The mind is here to serve us, not the other way around. To understand this, we must first recognize that our thoughts are not absolute truths. They are not fixed realities. They are fleeting, momentary occurrences, just like the wind or the rain. They come and go. We have the power to observe them without becoming entangled in them. When we realize this, we begin to break free from the false identification with the mind. We are not our thoughts, just as we are not the clothes we wear or the possessions we accumulate. We are the conscious awareness behind the thoughts, the observer who watches them arise and dissolve. And in that awareness we discover our true power. Imagine for a moment that your mind is like a ship, and you are the captain. The ship has incredible potential. It can sail across vast oceans, explore uncharted waters, and carry you to distant lands. But if the captain is not at the helm, the ship will drift aimlessly. It will be tossed about by the winds, caught in the currents, and subject to the whims of the sea. The mind is the same. It has immense potential, but it needs direction, focus, and purpose. Without a clear intention, the mind will wander, caught in the storms of worry, doubt, and distraction. But when we take the helm, when we consciously direct the mind with awareness and intention, it becomes a powerful ally, a servant that works tirelessly to manifest our desires. This is not a matter of suppressing or controlling the mind, but of guiding it with awareness. The mind is not our enemy, it is a tool, a servant that can help us navigate. The key is to recognize that we are the ones in charge, not the thoughts that arise within us. We must learn to observe our thoughts without being swept away by them. We must cultivate a sense of detachment, not in the sense of being cold or indifferent, but in the sense of recognizing that we are not our thoughts. We are the awareness that stands behind them, watching them come and go like waves on the shore. When we begin to act as if the mind is our servant, we start to experience life differently. We no longer feel at the mercy of our emotions, our doubts, or our fears. We begin to see them for what they are, temporary and fleeting. We understand that they are not permanent states of being, but passing moments that do not define us. And in that space of awareness we find freedom. We become free to choose how we respond, free to act with intention, free to create the life we desire. This shift is not something that happens overnight. It takes practice, patience, and a willingness to observe the mind without judgment. It requires us to cultivate the habit of stepping back and witnessing our thoughts from a place of detachment. But with time, we begin to realize that we are not at the mercy of the mind, we are the creators of it. The mind is our servant, and it will follow our lead, it will follow our lead, it will our intentions, and it will work tirelessly to bring our desires into reality. So, let us remember that the mind is not our master, it is our servant. And when we act with the understanding that we are the ones in charge, we free ourselves from the tyranny of thought. We step into our power, and in doing so, we begin to live the life we were always meant to live. The mind is a tool, and when used wisely, it can be the greatest ally in our journey toward fulfillment and peace. We live in a world that constantly urges us to seek control. We try to control our circumstances, our relationships, our careers, and even our emotions. But the greatest illusion of control is the belief that we can dominate our minds. We strive to manage every thought, tame every feeling, and force our minds into submission, only to find that the harder we try to control, the more chaotic things become. This paradox exists because we misunderstand the nature of control itself. The truth is, we are not in control of the mind in the way we often think we are. Instead, the mind is designed to serve us, not to lead us. When we seek control, we often forget that the mind is not something that needs to be controlled at all, it is simply a tool. Think about it. When we talk about trying to control our minds, we are attempting to control something that is already inherently uncontrollable. Thoughts arise spontaneously. Emotions surge from places we cannot always trace or predict. The nature of the mind is to flow, to change, to evolve. But the essence of who we are, the awareness that observes these thoughts and emotions, is constant, changing, and free. We mistake the river for the ocean. The river of thoughts flows by us, and yet we identify with it as though it defines us. But we are not the river, we are the ocean that holds it. Consider the profound truth that we are not at the mercy of our thoughts. Instead, we have the power to direct them. The thoughts we experience are merely waves in the ocean of our consciousness, and like waves, they rise, crest, and dissolve. They are momentary. It is we who decide what to do with them. Do we choose to get swept away, or do we let them pass by, observing them with curiosity and detachment? The power lies not in suppressing or controlling the thoughts themselves, but in changing how we relate to them. When we stop identifying with our thoughts, we break free from their control. We no longer believe that they define who we are or how we must act. When we think that we must control the mind, we engage in a struggle. We become trapped in a battle that we cannot win. Trying to force our minds into submission only strengthens the very thoughts we wish to escape. It is like fighting the wind or wrestling with the clouds. They are constantly shifting, constantly changing, and no matter how hard we try, they will not be contained. But once we accept that we are not meant to control our minds, that we are meant to guide them, we free ourselves from the fight. We stop resisting and start directing. This shift in perspective is essential because it reveals the true nature of our relationship with the mind. It is not about domination, but about alignment. Just as a musician does not control the instruments they play, but guides them through the mastery of their skill, so too do we guide our minds. The mind, when directed with awareness, will follow our intentions and help us manifest our desires. When we treat the mind as a servant rather than a master, we empower ourselves. We recognize that the thoughts we experience are not fixed or permanent. They are like clouds drifting across the sky, here one moment and gone the next. In the space between the clouds there is clarity. This clarity is our true nature. Let us think of the mind like a garden. A garden is not something we control. It grows, it flourishes, and it changes with the seasons. But we can guide its growth. We can decide what to plant, what to nurture, and what to let go of. We do not need to control every leaf or every stem. We simply need to tend to the soil, remove the weeds, and let the garden grow in its own time. The mind, too, flourishes when given the right conditions: awareness, acceptance, and direction. The weeds of negative thoughts, doubts, and fears can be removed, not by force, but by simply not watering them. When we choose to focus on positive, empowering thoughts, the garden of the mind blooms into something beautiful. This shift from control to guidance requires practice, patience, and awareness. It does not happen overnight, and it is not always easy. But when we begin to recognize the true nature of our relationship with the mind, everything changes. We stop identifying with the chaos of our thoughts, and we begin to cultivate the stillness that lies beneath them. We realize that the mind is not something to be feared or fought, but something to be understood and guided. And in that understanding we find peace. So, let us stop trying to control the mind. Let us stop struggling against the current of our thoughts. Instead, let us guide the mind with awareness, knowing that it is our servant, not our master. When we embrace this truth, we break free from the endless cycle of control, and we begin to live with intention. The mind, in all its complexity and brilliance, becomes a tool, a servant, helping us navigate life with clarity, purpose, and peace. We are constantly told that the key to mastering our lives is to control our thoughts, to conquer our minds, and to force our mental state into a place of stability. Yet the truth is that this constant striving to control the mind is often what causes the most chaos. The more we struggle to dominate our thoughts, the more they multiply, intensify, and distract us from our true purpose. It's as though the very act of attempting to control the mind creates a resistance that only strengthens the hold our thoughts have over us. So what if instead of trying to control the mind, we simply observed it? What if, instead of fighting against our thoughts, we let them come and go like clouds drifting across the sky? The mind, like a wild river, is always flowing, moving, changing, and evolving. We cannot control the river, but we can decide where to guide it. The mind is similar. Thoughts come and go, sometimes like a gentle stream, other times like a raging torrent. It is futile to try and control each thought that arises, just as it would be futile to attempt to hold each drop of water in a river. The key is not in controlling the flow, but in choosing the direction in which we want it to go. And in order to do this, we must first learn to step back and observe the river, to see it for what it is, a flow of energy, ever changing, ever moving. When we act as though the mind is our servant, rather than our master, we begin to develop a different relationship with our thoughts. Rather than becoming attached to them, we begin to see them as fleeting and temporary. The thought arises and we notice it, but we don't become consumed by it. We let it pass. We understand that the thought is not a reflection of who we are, but simply a momentary expression of the mind. Just as clouds appear and disappear in the sky, then the thoughts appear and disappear in the mind. Neither the clouds nor the thoughts hold any inherent meaning. They are simply there, part of the natural process of the universe. By recognizing that we are not our thoughts, we begin to dissolve the power they have over us. Thoughts no longer hold us captive because we realize that they do not define us. We are not bound by the fleeting nature of our mental patterns. We are the awareness behind them. We are the observer, the stillness at the center of the storm. When we can recognize this truth, we begin to break free from the constant noise in our minds. We stop identifying with the ceaseless chatter of thoughts, and instead we observe it from a place of detachment. This detachment is not about withdrawing from the world or abandoning our thoughts altogether. Rather, it is about stepping into a place of awareness where we are not identified with the thoughts, but can choose to engage with them consciously. Just as a gardener does not get lost in the weeds of the garden, but steps back to see the whole landscape, we too can step back from the mind, seeing it as a whole rather than getting lost in the individual thoughts that arise. We do not need to engage with every thought. We do not need to entertain every emotion. We can choose which thoughts to focus on and which ones to let go. When we begin to act as though our mind is our servant, we start to direct the flow of thoughts rather than being swept away by them. This doesn't mean that we control every thought, but rather that we choose where to place our attention. Just as a ship captain steers the ship but does not control the waves, we can steer the mind with intention without needing to control every wave of thought. We decide where we want to go, and the mind follows. The more we practice this, the more we develop a sense of clarity and purpose. We begin to realize that we are not victims of our thoughts, but creators of our experience. When we take the time to observe our thoughts without judgment, we begin to see that they are often based on old patterns, outdated beliefs, and habitual ways of thinking. These patterns do not serve us, but we have been conditioned to believe that they are the truth. We believe that our fears are real, that our doubts are justified, and that our worries are valid. But the truth is that these thoughts are simply old patterns running in the background of our minds. They are not who we are. When we take a step back and observe them with awareness, we can choose to release them. We do not have to hold on to them. In the space between thoughts, in the moments of silence and stillness, we find our true nature. It is here, in the present moment, that we are free. We are not bound by the past or the future, by the fears and the desires that swirl through our minds. In this space, we are simply aware, present, and alive. And when we allow ourselves to be present with each thought, to observe it without attachment, we create the space for new, more empowering thoughts to arise. So let us stop fighting the mind. Let us stop trying to control it. Let us remember that the mind is not our enemy, it is our servant. And when we act from a place of awareness rather than from a place of control, we unlock the true power of the mind. We begin to live with intention, not reacting to every thought or emotion, but creating from a place of clarity and purpose. The mind, when guided with awareness, becomes an ally in the pursuit of our highest potential. When we act as though our mind is our servant, we step into our own power and begin to create the life we truly desire. When we truly understand that the mind is our servant, not our master, we begin to see life in a completely new light. We shift from being passive observers of our thoughts, swept along by the current of mental chatter, to becoming active participants in the creation of our experience. It is often said that thoughts create reality, and yet many of us live as though we are victims to our own minds. We allow the flood of random, repetitive thoughts to dictate our emotions, shape our perceptions, and influence our actions. But when we recognize that we are the ones who can direct the mind, everything changes. The mind, at its core, is a powerful tool, a tool designed to serve us, not to control us. It is an instrument that, when used properly, can help us navigate the complexities of life, solve problems, and make decisions. However, when we lose sight of our role as the master of our minds, we allow it to take control, leading us into confusion, frustration, and fear. We begin to think that our thoughts define us, that they dictate who we are and what we are capable of. But in truth, our thoughts are just passing phenomena. They do not have the power to define us unless we give them that power. Consider the moment when you wake up in the morning. The first thoughts that arise in your mind are often random and disconnected. Some might be about the day ahead, others about lingering worries or unresolved concerns. These thoughts are not necessarily reflective of who you are at your core. They are simply the result of a mind that has been conditioned by years of habit and experience. However, many people, without realizing it, begin to identify with these first thoughts. They allow them to shape their emotions and their behavior. If the first thoughts of the day are anxious or negative, the rest of the day can often be colored by that initial state. But imagine if, instead of being swept away by those thoughts, you stepped back and observed them. What if you realized that those thoughts were not you, but simply fleeting waves of energy moving through your consciousness? When you recognize that you are the observer of your thoughts, not the thinker, you gain the ability to choose your response. Instead of reacting automatically to the first thought that arises, you can pause, take a deep breath, and consciously decide how to direct your mind. You can choose to focus on something positive, something that aligns with your values and intentions. You can remind yourself that you are in charge of the direction in which your thoughts flow, and that you are not beholden to the first random thought that arises. The more you practice this, the more you begin to see the mind as a tool that works for you, rather than against you. This shift from being controlled by the mind to directing it with purpose is one of the most liberating experiences you can have. When you act with the awareness that the mind is your servant, you free yourself from the tyranny of automatic thinking. You no longer allow fear, doubt, or negative self-talk to dictate your actions. Instead, you act from a place of clarity and intention. You begin to recognize that every thought is a choice, and you can choose thoughts that empower you rather than limit you. But this requires a certain level of self-awareness. It requires you to develop the ability to observe your thoughts without judgment or attachment. It requires you to step outside of the constant stream of mental noise and simply be present with what is happening in your mind. This does not mean that you suppress or deny your thoughts. Rather, it means that you acknowledge them without allowing them to control your behavior. You become the silent observer of your own mind, watching thoughts come and go without being swept away by them. As you develop this awareness, you begin to realize that your mind is not a chaotic, uncontrollable force. It is simply a reflection of your habitual patterns and beliefs. The more you observe your thoughts, the more you begin to notice the patterns that arise. You begin to recognize that many of the thoughts that cause you distress or anxiety are based on old beliefs or past experiences that no longer serve you. They are like old programming running in the background, influencing your present moment without your conscious awareness. But once you become aware of these patterns, you gain the power to change them. You can choose to replace limiting thoughts with empowering ones. You can choose to reprogram your mind to support your goals, your dreams, and your highest potential. This is the power of acting as if the mind is your servant. You begin to realize that you have the ability to direct your mental energy towards what you truly desire. Instead of being carried away by negative thoughts or self-doubt, you can focus on the present moment and choose thoughts that align with your vision for your life. The more you practice this, the more you begin to see that you are not at the mercy of your mind, but that you are the creator of your experience. It is in this space of conscious choice that you begin to live with purpose. You stop reacting to the external world and instead begin to create from within. You realize that the mind is a tool to help you navigate life, not a prison that confines you. By mastering your thoughts and directing them with intention, you create the life you desire, free from the limitations of automatic thinking. When you act as if your mind is your servant, you align yourself with your highest potential and begin to live a life of freedom, peace, and purpose. There is a profound shift that occurs when we realize that we are not the prisoners of our minds, but the masters of them. This shift opens up a world of possibility where we are no longer tossed around by the waves of our thoughts, emotions, and impulses. Instead, we learn to stand firm in the stillness of our awareness, guiding our minds like a ship's captain steers the vessel through the sea. The power we have over our thoughts is not about controlling them or suppressing them, but about recognizing our ability to choose how we relate to them. We can either allow them to dictate our reality, or we can choose to direct them toward the life we truly desire. Imagine for a moment the difference between being carried by the winds of thought and taking the helm of your own mind. When we are simply reacting to every passing thought or emotional surge, we are like leaves in the wind, subject to forces outside of our control. But when we recognize that the mind is our servant, we take command. We begin to realize that we are not at the mercy of our thoughts. We are the ones who decide which thoughts we give attention to, which ones we entertain, and which ones we allow to pass by. This awareness is the foundation of a life lived with intention. It is the ability to step back from the constant stream of thoughts and view them objectively, without becoming entangled in their web. The key to this is mindfulness, simply observing the thoughts as they arise and pass, without judgment or attachment. Just as a cloud floats by in the sky, a thought appears in the mind. But unlike the cloud, we do not have to cling to the thought or allow it to dictate the course of our day. We can observe it, acknowledge its presence, and then let it go. By doing this, we create a sense of space in our minds, a space where we can choose to focus on the thoughts that serve us, rather than being consumed by those that hold us back. Once we begin to cultivate this awareness, we start to see the thoughts that arise in our minds for what they truly are, passing phenomena, not fixed truths. Our thoughts are not who we are, and they do not define our worth or our potential. They are simply mental constructs, patterns of energy that come and go. When we understand this, we free ourselves from the tyranny of negative thinking, self-doubt, and fear. We stop identifying with every thought that arises, and instead, we recognize that we are the space in which these thoughts occur. This recognition gives us the power to choose our response. Instead of reacting impulsively to a negative thought or emotion, we can take a moment to pause and decide how we want to respond. We can choose to reframe the thought in a way that aligns with our values and our goals. We can choose to let go of thoughts that do not serve us and replace them with those that empower us. This is not about suppressing our emotions or denying our experiences, but about recognizing that we have the power to choose how we engage with them. Imagine how different life would be if we lived from this place of conscious awareness, where we were not at the mercy of every passing thought, but instead guided our thoughts with clarity and purpose. In every moment, we would have the opportunity to choose which thoughts we give energy to and which ones we let go of. We could choose to focus on gratitude rather than fear, on possibility rather than limitation, on love rather than judgment. When we act as though the mind is our servant, we stop allowing the outside world to control us. We stop reacting to external circumstances, and instead we respond with intention. We no longer live in a state of reactivity, constantly influenced by the opinions of others, by past experiences, or by future worries. We step into a place of inner strength, where we are guided by our own awareness and purpose. We become the creators of our reality, not the victims of our thoughts. Of course, this is not a process that happens overnight. It takes time, practice, and patience to break free from the habitual patterns of the mind. But as we begin to practice mindfulness and cultivate awareness, we start to notice the difference. We begin to feel more grounded, more centered, and more in control of our responses. We become less susceptible to the fluctuations of our emotions and more able to remain steady in the face of challenges. The more we practice guiding our minds, the more we realize that our thoughts are not the enemy, they are simply a tool. And like any tool, the mind can be used wisely or recklessly. When we act with intention, the mind becomes an ally, helping us navigate life with clarity, focus, and purpose. When we allow ourselves to be ruled by the mind, however, we become lost in the chaos of our thoughts, overwhelmed by the noise and disconnected from our true potential. In the end, it all comes down to awareness, the recognition that we are the masters of our minds, not the other way around. Once we understand this, we begin to live with greater peace, clarity, and confidence. We no longer feel at the mercy of our thoughts, but instead, we feel empowered to direct them toward the life we truly want to create. The mind becomes a tool that works for us, helping us manifest our deepest desires and live a life of purpose. When we act as though the mind is our servant, we unlock the full potential of our being and step into a life of freedom, abundance, and joy.